team. So we are going to have a look at two basic bridge and roll escapes from the mount. Another very important skill that we all are aware of is if our attacker manages to get mount on top of us. A very scary situation, especially if they're much bigger and stronger. So we need to understand hip placement and technical aspects to be able to execute this move. So someone that's smaller and weaker can overpower a much stronger assailant just by understanding technique and leverage. So let's have a look at this one. Okay, so let's just have a look at those two techniques that we just looked at before. One being with an overhook method and another one just the basic by bringing the elbow in. So, we found ourselves in a self-defense situation with our attacker on top of our hips. First thing is the ability that my attacker is able to strike me. He can rain down much more damage than I can to him. All that energy that I inflict on my opponent, that's just going to go back up. He's also got gravity on his side as well. Okay, so it's a very, very dangerous position to be in, especially for self-defense. All right. So first thing is I need to close the distance. What I'm going to do with my attacker on top, if his legs are very high up into my armpits, I'm not going to be able to get the leverage to be able to get his hands to post on the ground. Okay, so let's look at this from worst case scenario. If my attacker is in a high mount, obviously you're going to do the best you can to cover up his strikes. My hands are going to be covering up as best I can. The next thing I want to do is I want to shrink my hips back in this direction so that I can get my attacker's hips underneath my hips. So here I'm covering up, I'm going to shrink back. Now I'm in a much better position because now I have leverage on my side. Okay, now I want to try and get his body weight posted on the mat. So as he inflicts damage and strikes, I use the elevation of hips and I can even use my knee to buck him down. Once I manage to get his hands posted on the ground here, what I'm going to do is my arm is going to reach up over the top and grab his arm. So I reach up and I pull his arm in tight. You'll notice what I've done is I pulled his arm across my body, okay, because his ability to strike me is a little bit difficult as opposed to having here, okay? He can use this arm to post up, he can rain down headbutts, etc. Whereas if I have his arm across, I keep my head in nice and tight. This is just the basic way of actually getting out of the mount, but I'm going to show you the next technique with the overhook method. But once I manage to get his arm across my body, now I can use my foot to trap his ankle here. You'll notice now that I've taken away his base. His ability to base out as I buck and roll him over, he can't now. Okay, so now my foot can come into the middle of my hip. I'm going to do an elevation. As I elevate my hips, notice his body weight goes up and over. I want to be turning 45 degrees. So I elevate and I turn up and roll 45 degrees. Now from here, we're in a much better position, which is obviously inside closed guard. And then from here, if this is self-defense, I can look at maybe pinning the arms, start raining down strikes myself until I can get away. All right? That's the first technique. The second technique is once you understand the mechanics of the hip placement and the arm, the next technique is more applicable for self-defense because we utilize an overhook method. Let's have a look at this one. So I have my attacker on top. First thing is, if he's in a high mount, I need to wiggle my body back this way. So I'm going to cover up as best I can. I wiggle back. Now I use an elevation and a bucking method with my hip, as well as I knee to the back of his hip to get him to the post. Once I manage to post him down, my preferred method is actually to latch my body around my attacker's waist. So I want to keep my chest in nice and tight, and I don't want to keep my head away, because if my head is away, he can start striking me. Remember, Two rules, all the way out or all the way in. So I want to close the distance. I keep him in nice and tight. Now, his ability to strike me, he has to post up off the ground in order to strike me. Okay, so I don't stay here. Okay, I keep my chest in nice and tight, and then what I want to use is utilize my feet on the ground to bring him back to the mat. Okay, once I manage to bring him back to the mat, I still keep my head in. Now from here, my far arm can wrap around the back of his body, and then this arm here can do an overhook. So my arm that's here is going to overhook and bring his arm in nice and tight. All right, so here, maybe I can get this gable grip. Another important thing is when we drill this in class, I normally tell you guys to not bring your hand on the mat to stop you from rolling over your wrist. So what Anth does is he tucks his hand in there to make it safe to roll over. So once I manage to immobilize the arm, sometimes I can get this gable grip. I keep my head in nice and tight. Now I want to take away his base by trapping his foot, okay? You can trap the foot. Another variation is we could just stay heavy on the leg. I stay heavy on the leg, and that stops him from pulling his foot out. And now from here is I use my far leg, and it's an elevation of the hips. So I elevate my hips, and I tuck and roll 45 degrees. This variation I really like, because as I manage to roll him over, I have this arm pinned. I can also swim this arm in and pin his shoulder as well, okay? A very effective technique is also headbutts. So if I have both his arms immobilized, I can bang, rain down headbutts. Also, I can start the process of posting up and striking here. And then I can get away. All right, so there were two variations that we looked at. Let's have a look at that really quick. First technique, the basic bridge and roll. So here I want to cut the bring him back down. If he's in high, I want to pull him, get his body down. My arms are going to reach up, trap his arm. I keep my head in nice and tight, foot traps the hip. Elevation, I elevate my hips and roll over my shoulder. Okay, let's have a look at the overhook method. So, overhook method is much more preferred for self-defense. Okay, so here, my attacker's on top, I cover up as best I can. I want to elevate and utilize a knee to get him to post his hands on the mat. Now I'm going to close the distance by bringing my head in nice and tight to my attacker's chest. As he tries to posture up to punch me, I use my feet on the ground to pull him back down. Now I can start the process of walking my body upwards, still keeping my head in nice and tight. My arm is going to wrap around the back. Now this arm here is going to swim over the top, and I'm going to overhook this arm here. If I can, maybe I can get a gable grip. Don't forget too, guys, always keep your head nice and close to your attacker. Now I can take away his base either by one, trapping the foot that way, or I can extend my leg out and trap his leg. Nice and heavy, it's an elevation of the hips, and I 45-degree roll him over. From here, I have this arm immobilized. I can swim this arm in here. I can start raining down headbutts, also elbows. Inflict as much damage as possible, enable you to get away. So they are the two basic bridge and roll escapes from the mount.